Hi students, in this section we are going to be learning about division of real numbers. So when we're working with the division of real numbers, we're going to be looking at some reciprocal type situations, and what the reciprocal is that's the inverse property of multiplication. So an example of this would be for the number -3, the reciprocal of that would be flipping -3 to make it become a -1/3. The only number that does not have a reciprocal would be the number 0. You can use the reciprocal method to write a division expression as a product, meaning a multiplication problem. So I have some examples down here with this division rule. It says here to divide a number A by a non-zero number B, multiply A by the reciprocal of B. So for instance here, if you have A divided by B, that would mean the same thing. You can solve that by taking A and multiplying it by the reciprocal of 1 over B. So example here, -1 divided by 3. You can take -1 and multiply it by the reciprocal 1/3 and get an answer of -1/3. So that's how we can work with division working with real numbers. So let's get into some examples right here. For example number 1a, we have 15 divided by -5. We're going to keep 15 the way it is, so I'll write 15. We're going to multiply that by the reciprocal of -5, which we need to keep that negative sign, and that would now become 1/5. Whoops, sorry, that line always happens when I'm writing my notes for you guys. So the way we can think of this is it could be 15 over 1 times -1/5. We can simplify this before we multiply across, or we can just multiply across. Well, 5 goes into 15 3 times, so I can simplify this before solving it. So this 15 now becomes a 3, and the 5 becomes a 1 since 5 goes into 15 3 times. So now we take 3 times -1, which becomes -3 over 1, which simplifies to -3. That's the way we can solve this. Or if you just multiplied across, that would be a -15 over 5, which also simplifies to -3. So whatever way you want to solve it works, as long as you show your work and you get the right answer. So I showed you both ways you can go about solving this. For B, very similarly, we have -45 times 5/6. So using the same method, we'll keep that -45, and we're going to multiply it by the reciprocal. So the reciprocal of 5/6 would be 6 over 5. We can think of this as -45 over 1. You can either just multiply across to solve, or you can simplify first. So how many times does 5 go into 45? That would be 9. So we can cross off the 45 9 times. 9 times 5 is 45. Now we multiply across. This would be a -9 because the negative in front here. -9 times 6 is going to give me -54 over 1, which simplifies to -54, and that'll be my answer for B. Now for C, notice we have a mixed number here. We have 2 1/3 divided by -3. So the first thing I would do here was make this mixed number an improper fraction. So I'm going to multiply 2 times 3 to get 6, and then I add that numerator, add 1 to get 7. So this now becomes 7/3 divided by -3. Well, working with the same method we've been talking about in this chapter, or this section, let's multiply by the reciprocal. So that's going to be 7/3 times -1/3. So let's look at this. Is there anything we can cross-cancel here to simplify it down before we get the final answer? No, 3 does not go into 7, 3 does not go into 1. So here we're just going to multiply across. So 7 times -1 gives me -7, and then 3 times 3 gives me 9, and we cannot simplify this any further, so -7/9 would be my answer for example 1, letter C. Moving on to example 2 type questions. Here, they're giving us a situation and we have to simplify or evaluate it. So for A, it says simplify the expression of 25d minus 125 over a negative 5. Well, what's going to help you solve this is you're dividing the negative 5 to both the 25d and to the negative 125. So you can break this apart and think of it as 25d divided by negative 5, and then negative 125 divided by negative 5. So 25d divided by negative 5, let me erase this so I have room to show my work. 25d divided by negative 5, well, 25 divided by negative 5 is going to give me a negative 5 because positive divided by negative is a negative answer. Don't forget about the variable, so that's going to be a negative 5d. Now let's solve it for negative 125 over negative 5. Negative 125 over negative 5 is going to give me an answer of positive 25 because negative divided by negative is positive. 125 divided by 5 is 25. So now I'm going to write my final answer by combining what I got here. So I got negative 5d. It's going to be plus 25 because that's a positive 25 here. So when we're dividing 25d minus 125 over negative 5, your final answer is going to be a negative 5d plus 25. And that's how you go about solving that. For B, we're going to evaluate the expression. So very similar to what we just did, but they're wanting us to substitute numbers in for the variable. So substituting negative 3 in for s, and t in, or negative 1 in for t. So here we have s minus 3t. So that would be negative 3 minus 3 times your t is negative 1 over 2 times s would be a negative 3. So let's simplify this. Let's first simplify the numerator, and that's going to become, well, negative 3 times negative 1 is going to give me a positive 3. So that's going to be negative 3 plus 3 over 2 times negative 3 becomes negative 6. We're going to continue simplifying. Negative 3 plus 3 is going to give me 0 over negative 6. You can divide a number by 0. 0 divided by negative 6 is just going to give me the answer of 0. You cannot divide by 0. So if I had negative 6 over 0, you cannot do that. So this is what you would get undefined right here. But we don't have that situation. I just wanted to point that out because you'll see some of that in the bookwork. Moving on to our last example here, you'll see questions in this section that says find the domain of a function. Domain is solving for x. Solving for x. So here we have our function of y equals 6 over 4 plus x. We want to solve for this x right here. So all you're really looking at is your denominator, that 4 plus x, and we're going to set that equal to 0. 4 plus x equal to 0, because we need to figure out what x, we're going to solve for x, and we're going to figure out what number x cannot be, because remember on the previous slide I said you cannot divide by 0. So we want to make sure we can find a number that's going to solve for x to not give us 0 as the denominator. So to solve for x, I'm going to subtract 4 to both sides. X here equals negative 4. So find the domain for this function. So x equals negative 4. So what that means is 6 over 4 plus negative 4. X cannot equal negative 4 because it's going to give me that 6 over 0, which cannot happen. That would be undefined. So what we say here, the domain, x, the domain x can be all real numbers except -4. Because if we have x equals -4, that's going to give me 0 for the denominator, and we cannot divide by 0. So there's really 2 steps to this kind of a question. You're solving for x and then stating that x can be any number except that number you solved for. So that is it for this section.